When I was in 8th grade, we were tied with our crosstown rival in one of the most important football games of my young career. During a 2-point conversion where we could have broken the tie and gone for the win, Dylan Egloff, my teammate, was there to witness this. At the last second, my QB screamed out Josh as the play broke down. I turned around in the end zone, and the ball hit me directly in the face mask. I share that because, Foster Moreau, I want you to know you're not alone, man. You're not the only player who, when everyone was watching, could make a very easy play and win the game, or at least tie it, and everyone love you. Coaches put that on film on repeat, and everyone laughed at me, and Dylan bullied me, and I just really need to get that off my chest.
I knew exactly where you were going. As soon as you said, I turned my head, and I literally knew I know exactly what story he's about to tell.
Bro, the doink noise Al Michaels was referring to, it was that off of my face mask. And so, Foster, I've had egg on my face. You've had egg on yours. It certainly didn't help Derek Carr's fantasy night, although he did rectify it with a late fourth quarter. Dylan, it is good to have you in studio. We're doing the Thursday Night Football reaction. I'm glad you could share that personal story with me. We have so much history. Davis is not with us tonight. He has a work engagement for his other job where he is building a great athletic program, not just talking about his team and being a menace to society here on the show. So he is missed. He will be back soon. Dylan, I want to go to you right away. Derek Carr. Well, I go to you right away. I want to go to you with this. Derek Carr has been infamous for your team. He was in a trade. You traded away your 24 first, which you acquired by trading away Christian McCaffrey. It's been kind of the slippery slope of decisions you would like to take back. Derek Carr versus Carmichael, the offensive coordinator for the Saints. Mike Smith actually talked about him on Thursday Night Football. Is Derek Carr the problem, or is it Carmichael from what you – and can you even tell, to be honest? But if you had to pick, which of the two is at fault?
Yeah, I'm not going to reminisce anymore on the decisions that I've made in the past. I'm moving forward. And I'm going to be completely honest about the first 2 quarters and maybe midway through the third quarter. I was ready to get on here and just talk about how awful Derek Carr is. And then I see Derek Carr literally every single time that their drive is dead. You just see him look over and just start cussing and yelling and snapping his chin strap off, and just he goes straight to Pete Carmichael, goes straight to him, and then just starts ripping and leaning into him. And they never look like they're in sync. So for the first half of the game, I was like, Carr, you are awful. You're making awful decisions. All you're doing is checking it down. And then I see that interaction. To sum it up, it is a Carmichael issue. This is not a Derek Carr issue. I do not think that Derek Carr is the issue. I'm not going to come here and say that he is a top 15 quarterback even. I do think he's a top 20 quarterback for fantasy, and I do think he's shown in the last couple of weeks. I mean, he put up 21 points tonight. Like, that's serviceable as a QB2, and that was with a horrible start to the game. So I think it's a Carmichael issue. I think there's a lot of stuff going on, and even before the game, they were talking about how Michael Thomas was referencing something was going on, and Kamara said something. They're being super ambiguous about what's going on. It's got to be a Carmichael issue. Please tell you got my back on this, right? Help me feel better about Carr.
For sure. No, I would definitely say the offense isn't in sync. And what Carr does have going for him from a resume perspective is this is a guy who has had 30 touchdown seasons with the Raiders in the right system. I remember Jack Del Rio, Michael Crabtree days. We've seen Derek Carr sling the rock. And I don't think that physically he's gone or he's dissipated to a point where he can't do what he used to do, especially just throwing the football. What saved Derek Carr, however, was Alvin Kamara. I think that there is 100% I think it's on both of them. It's a Carr and Carmichael issue. Carmichael has been with the Saints so long. They're trying to run the Drew Brees instant, get the ball out like the moment the ball is snapped kind of offense. Derek Carr works well off of play action based on my experience.
Well, that's a great point too. That actually is a great point because Derek Carr doesn't have time to throw the ball. There's a reason why they're trying to get the ball out of his hand quickly. They kept showing him during the broadcast, his offensive line was just collapsing on itself. So I think there's a lot of variables, and you can't just say it's a Carr problem. That's the easy way out.
No, I'm not saying it's just a Carr problem. I think it is a Carmichael issue for sure, more than Derek Carr. That being said, Derek Carr has got to, he embraced it. The offense started to work and they had a sustained drive going into, end of the third, into the fourth by checking it down to Alvin Kamara, letting him be the PPR monster that he was. 12 receptions for 91 yards. If you're in a dynasty league, this is house money. Ride Alvin Kamara till the wheels fall off. There is nothing anyone can, because do you think Alvin Kamara would go for a first right now to a contending team?
If you're a contending team. If I was a contending team, I would spend the first.
Running back? Oh, he's worth
Yeah.
it. Okay,
Yeah,
never mind then.
absolutely. Yeah, if you're contending, why would you not? He's going to be. I mean, Derek Carr's just literally all he can do is check it down to Kamara. That's all he can
Yeah.
do.
No, and pass catching running backs, I always think of Dion Lewis. I think of Theo Riddick. I think of who was the other guy? James White.
Hmm.
The Patriots running backs, they can last a lot longer. Alvin Kamara still looks really, really good. He kind of saved Derek Carr toward the end there. I'm going to say it's a bad game based on expectations. 7 for 57 for Chris Olave. This was another dynasty darling. He would have been the talk of the town if Garrett Wilson didn't exist. He had such a good rookie season. Derek Carr is not clicking with him. That fade route at the end of the game made me so upset because do not throw a jump ball fade to a receiver who is a great route runner. There is a slant, there is a zig, there is an entire route tree that you can combine the 9 routes into like 80 different combinations, and you chose the worst one. Chris Olave, another disappointing week. Dylan, do you think Carr and him get it together? I know you're the Carr owner. I know you want to be optimistic. But seriously, if you had a trade where you could get Olave for free on your team, or you could get DK Metcalf for free on your team, tell me you wouldn't take DK Metcalf.
Oh, I'm a big DK Metcalf guy, so I'm definitely taking DK Metcalf. And you're right. There is a car problem with Olave. that he has a car problem. And I don't know what it is. And again, it could just be their offense as a whole is out of sync. Because there was earlier in the game where Carr got pissed at Olave because Olave just kind of gave up mid route. Like, I don't know if that was miscommunication or what, but yeah, Olave isn't getting mainly the downfield targets. We talked about Olave. Olave is a guy that he's not a yak guy. He's the guy that's going to get downfield and he's going to have a ton of air yards, and that's what he did last year, and that's why he was so successful with Andy Dalton just slinging it to him. But they're not doing that. I don't know why they're not doing that.
No, do you remember Davis? This was before the show was published. We were doing an owners only show, and Davis talked about Chris Olave, and he came all ready about like, did you know Chris Olave is leading the league? This is last season in ADOT. This is a guy, and he after the show he's like, I had more stats than you, Welsh. It was what'd you think? It was like the most proud he'd ever been of stats. Chris Olave currently is not having the ADOT. He is not.
No.
I mean, 7 for 57. That's less than 10 a pop on the catch.
That's worrisome. That's worrisome for who was a top 12 wide receiver. Like if he's not getting that ADOT, I'm worried. Like if he's that reliant on it, that's a problem.
No, it was cool to see Michael Thomas have a bit of a fantasy pulse in our league. The startup draft, I would say he is the single worst fantasy beat of all time. So for as bad as you feel, Dylan, if you can remember, Michael Thomas, after that 1,700-yard season, that was when we did our startup draft. Someone took him at the 105, and he literally never scored points for that guy's team. He had to trade him away for beans. So it's always funny to see. Going to the other side of the ball in terms of Jacksonville, obviously Chris Olave, Carr, they got to figure something out. Trevor Lawrence seems to be figuring out how to win games, but how to really hurt your fantasy team. This is a guy who is in the top 10. He's currently, or of quarterbacks on Keep Trade Cut, he's currently at 9. Hot take. I don't know if it's hot, actually. I think he's going to fall. I think people are going to get around to the fact that this is a great real life NFL QB, not a great fantasy QB. Because listen, the only reason he was able to, salvage his night was 59 yards on the ground. He was rushing with a knee brace on, so they didn't have a QB spy on him. He got some free extra yards. Dylan, do you disagree that Trevor Lawrence is more of an NFL QB than he is a fantasy QB?
I don't disagree, sadly. I don't think he'll fall. I think QB9, QB10 is definitely his floor. I think that's as low as he'll go. Because then you start to get into the waters of like a Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, those guys, and I just don't see him falling below. But I think it's warranted that he's at QB9, falling behind guys like Tua Tagovailoa and A-Rich. I'm taking both of those guys over him easily. And tonight he looked good on the ground, and that kind of buoyed his production. Otherwise, he would have had around the same game that he's had for the last 3 weeks, which is around like 14 points, like that's not
200
QB
yards and a single touchdown.
Yeah, that's not QB. And I get it. Like Etienne's just balling out. Like he's having 2 touchdowns a game. So I get it. He's not needing to throw the ball, but that's worrisome regardless that his production's been that consistently poor. So I definitely think he'll slide, but I don't think he'll slide much lower than QB10.
I want to talk about Etienne because one, he's a fantasy superstar right now. And as a dynasty player, if you held him through that first year when he was unavailable, through kind of the ebbs and flows of him being boom bust, you're finally getting to enjoy Etienne in his prime. Good for you. Dylan, that wasn't to you because you traded him away for 4 seconds most recently, embracing kind of your more of a rebuild model, though you're still trying to make playoffs. And I think you actually still can. But is Etienne Is this the new normal for him? Is he moved himself into the upper echelon, the top 5 dynasty running backs, the top 5 just regular for redraft purposes fantasy running backs with another performance on the ground? And most importantly, those inside the 5 touches where he's being trusted to go get in the end zone. And that's what makes for fantasy greatness.
Yeah, Etienne. I may have passed on that a little too quickly. But I mean, the dude is just balling out. I don't know. With every running back, it's just so terrifying because the production isn't sustainable unless it's Christian McCaffrey. He's the only one that's proven to do it for as long as he has. And even he had a 2-year hiatus where he was injured. So
Yeah,
I like the production right now with I like the production that ETN's giving you. And I mean, honestly, here's where I'm at with running backs. If you're getting that from a top end running back, ride it out. Like, what are you going to do? Especially if he's winning you games, you're not going to trade him. So you might as well just ride it out and hope for the best.
If for whatever reason you are like 1 in 5 with ETN, you
Yeah.
maybe should sell high, but because how much higher in value can he go? I mean, even speaking to your trade, yeah, it was 4 seconds, but how much higher could he have gone in value? No running back, very few, if any, running backs are worth 3 firsts. We're going to be talking about rookies maybe later in the season, but Bijan Robinson was traded for like Anthony Richardson plus. Anyone who currently has Bijan Robinson, who's still a rookie, would probably want to undo that trade in a Superflex league. So ETN going for 4 seconds, although you may have missed out on peak price, you at least got 85 cents on the dollar because while he's doing good in the touchdown department, it's not like he's having 100-yard games and 5 to 10 receptions a week. So amazing performance. I do think he's in his prime. I think he's this year's Josh Jacobs. He was that middle round running back in redraft. He was that running back in Dynasty that was always good, but is now being great. I think you're happy if you have him. But if you can get 2 firsts for him and you don't see you're making playoffs, I would happily ship him off because
224 first, absolutely, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. And you never know. Every league is different. But ETN, nothing short of impressive. We don't have to talk about Christian Kirk much. I have said from the start he is the wide receiver 1. Josh Walsh.
We don't. You're right. We do not have to talk about him. You know why? Because I'll let you. You can save your breath because I'm going to save my breath because I've sat here and defended him for weeks now about why he's the wide receiver 1. Why is he the wide receiver 1? Because he's the wide receiver 1. End of story. Why is Calvin Ridley's season just beginning, Josh Walsh? Please explain what's going on there.
So I would like to refer to my attorney. No, I think Calvin Ridley is an incredible outside wide receiver. I think he looks dynamic as a playmaker. The truth is Christian Kirk, like the first 3 quarters of the game, kind of lulls you to sleep with the consistent slot production, those first down getting routes, the outs, the ins that he goes down shortly afterward. It was all yak for him tonight. That essentially game-winning touchdown that he scored, that was him all after the catch. It was reminiscent of his days at A&M when he was a kick returner and they would use him on jet sweeps. It's easy to forget that Christian Kirk, who's, he's not old, but he's not young either, is great with the ball in his hands after he's made the catch. And so I just think that Calvin Ridley, he's been a wide receiver 3 in Atlanta. He showed us that ceiling. It's alluring. And you were just hoping that T-Law would hyper-target him. T-Law's not that guy. He throws to the open, super clear read. And that's just the kind of quarterback he is. Calvin really still has the potential. I'll say that much. But you were correct.
He does. But Christian Kirk is he's a beefy dude. He's like 200 pounds, but the dude's like a running back playing receiver, and he's fast. So if I'm sitting here advocating for an Aggie, Josh Walsh, there's got to be some validity to it. I don't just sit here and talk about how good an Aggie is, okay? He's a stud, though.
No, that's more than fair. You're trusting your eyes. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get Dylan's reaction to the confirmed news that A-Rich is going to miss the rest of the season. Dylan being the biggest fan of him, we still need his reaction and maybe a few other quarterbacks that we're excited to talk about. Stay tuned. Without question, the player Dylan planted his flag on the most this season was Anthony Richardson. Something all fantasy players experience is the unfairness of injuries. You can be completely correct about a player, and injuries can just rob you, rob your team, and more importantly, rob your pride of the ability to say, look, I was right. Anthony Richardson done, going to get shoulder surgery. Dylan, Davis and I talked about it a little bit. He made the case that he's not Trey Lance. I made the case that, hey, maybe you need to keep an eye on his value because this could get out of hand quickly. Well, that's what I want to know. Are you concerned about his long-term future with him missing the rest of the season and not getting the reps he needs to develop from a raw prospect into a polished product who's going to be able to lead the Colts to victory.
Stop it. I don't want to hear this Trey Lance. You're the second person that's told me this. He's the next Trey Lance. He's not going to get. No, there's a fundamental difference. But I do want to actually give credit where credit's due, Mr. Nuemi. He did say we're getting robbed of that top 5. I think he said top 3, actually,
He did
QB,
top
which
3.
he very well could have been a top 3 QB with. I mean, Mahomes isn't scoring how we expect him to yet, right? Joe Burrow hasn't been scoring like we expect him to yet. So he could have definitely finished as a top 3 the way that he was running the ball as well. The reason why I'm not worried about him in comparison to a Trey Lance is because Trey Lance didn't have he never showed that he can actually throw the ball well. He had a couple of deep balls that looked good, which so did Zach Wilson, right? We all loved Zach Wilson during the draft process. That's why it was a second quarterback taken off. NFL did because of how his one throw that he made. Remember at his pro day, the one throw he made, Zach Wilson, running to the side and just launches it like exactly. So he was boosted up because of that. Trey Lance, we never really saw him throw the ball because even when he was in college at North Dakota State, he didn't throw the ball. That's not what he was. Well, he had 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000 yards passing. That was the big thing that boosted him up. But his rushing was mainly what boosted him up.
Yeah, he wasn't drafted for his arm for sure.
No, he was not. A-Rich, the talent is there. The arm talent is there. And we saw it on display both at Florida and we saw it in the NFL. I'm not worried about it. The thing that I'm worried about, and I will give validity to because I would be pleading ignorance if I didn't. The injuries are a concern. Absolutely. The fact that he's a quarter of the way through the season and already out for the season because of a shoulder injury. The shoulder injury, it didn't look like it was a crazy hit or anything. It just happened to be how he fell and the contact that he made with the other player. But regardless, that's still concerning. It's a second injury, and this one was season ending.
You know me, and I've worn a lot of different hats in life. You remember that summer camp, Windy Gap, where I went to go wrangle horses one time?
Yes, you think Young Life Camp? Yes.
Yeah, no, exactly. There was all these baby birds that were learning how to fly, and they were like they grow into like really big, powerful birds. But when they first jump out of the nest,
Are you calling A-Rich a baby bird right now?
Yeah, I think he's a baby eagle, bro. If this guy can learn how to use his body correctly, and I'm not saying, listen, he's a much better athlete than I'll ever be. I get it. But I think that if the whole premise was this is a physical specimen, a superstar who can run the ball better than, he broke the combine, like he's bigger than Cam Newton physically, like unbelievable measurables. And then you break your wing early on, man, I'm hoping that he can learn how his body is supposed to be used in the NFL, because the thing that makes him special is the rushing. He could be a fine, athletic QB, kind of Dak Prescott-esque if he comes back. My concern, Dylan, is that yes, he'll come back, and I do believe he has the arm talent, like you said. But for fantasy purposes, does the rushing go away because they're worried about re-injury because he just doesn't know how to use his body?
No, that is his. He is the Konami code quarterback. He is the definition of what you want. The thing is, he just has to be smart. It's like Lamar Jackson, right? Lamar Jackson is actually smart when he runs the ball. He goes down properly. I'm not saying he's perfect at it. He definitely takes some hits he shouldn't take, but he's got to learn. You know what he should do, actually? He should go to wherever Tua went for preventing himself from getting sacked and hitting his head and learn how to actually fall and slide. Jiu-jitsu. That's what he did. Yeah. So if he does that, it's this. I actually have the same argument for why I'm still in on A-Rich as a top 5 dynasty quarterback as I am with Tua being a top 5 dynasty quarterback, because I'm going to ignore the injury. Tua, no one has even thought twice about the concussion issues because they haven't been an issue, right? If A-Rich can come back healthy, he's getting the season-ending shoulder surgery, which I think is smart. They didn't just force him because they technically still in it, right? Like the Colts could still go and compete. It's still an early season. They could go and compete. They could win games with him.
No, I mean with Minshew, absolutely. That is a question. Do you think Minshew is a buy low candidate based on like, hey, he's got the rest of the season? This isn't a quarterback you have to pay a first for, most likely. I say most likely. In 2 quarterback leagues or super flex, should Minshew be a buy low candidate right now in your mind?
Yeah, I think he'll be more than serviceable. He's proven to be a serviceable backup, and I think he'll be fine. I wouldn't spend more. I would try to just get him for a second. I don't know if I'd send a first. If you're sending a first, you might as well just go take your chance on next year. My own
question. He's not. When Minshew is a buy low candidate is before the Richardson injury. We make this mistake in Dynasty of like, oh, I'll go get a cheap QB. to get me there. But the reality is you're not buying a high-end QB who's going to win you games. So unless you're the team that has a loaded roster, making a playoff run, and the only thing that's missing is a quarterback too, then yes, Minshew is worth it to go buy, but it's certainly not low because what's Minshew's long-term value? He's Taylor Heineke. It's like, oh, if he gets a chance to start, he's better than the average Joe. If you're in a place where you're having to start Minshew, most likely you can't compete, so you shouldn't go buy him. And the other thing, too, is anything more than a couple thirds, yeah, I wouldn't do it because what is the long-term value? Minshew's not going to go get a starting job after this, even if he balls out.
Bravo, Walsh. Bravo. You've convinced me. You're right. I wouldn't go buy him. Everything you said makes complete sense. It doesn't make sense.
This is coming from experience. I bought Jacoby Brissett last year as a third QB before Deshaun Watson's, situation got announced and he was going to miss those 6 games. So I was like, oh, I'll go get Jacoby Brissett. I bought him for a third. The suspension happens. Jacoby Brissett went up in value. I started him for 3 games and then I resold him. And I sold him for exactly what I put into him, which was a third. And so my whole thing was like, oh, when I bought, made it a value. Right now, Minshew's not a value. You're paying the absolute max value he could ever be at because it took an injury to get him there, and it's only going to be for a limited amount of time. So moving on to another quarterback who shouldn't have a backup. Speaking of Deshaun Watson, I talked about Jacoby Brissett. PJ Walker got the start because Deshaun Watson had a rotator cuff injury last week, and they somehow got the win against the Niners. Deshaun Watson was flirting with top 10 or was in the top 10 at very brief points on Keep Trade Cut this summer into the offseason and going into the season. He's currently quarterback 17 on Keep Trade Cut. Deshaun Watson may miss another game. This guy has a fully guaranteed contract. Dylan, it seems like the market is completely out on Deshaun. Is there a chance that he can ever recoup his value, or is this us correctly valuing a has-been?
QB 17. I mean, how many times do we have to talk about KTC? It's just such an overreaction in both directions, with Puka Nacua being whatever he is, and now with Deshaun Watson. I think quarterback 17, that's pretty bad. Like, quarterback 17 is low. I do think there's a chance that he recoups his value. The second that he goes and comes back to the slightest bit of form, I think he recoups his value. I don't think he'll well, actually, let me ask you, what do you mean by recoup his value? Like top 5 QB or just back to top 10?
Can he back to top 10? Can he get back to top 10? Are people going to even believe in him again? Because we're all human beings. Keep Trade Cut, like we always talk about, it's the unwashed masses. He's not a likable guy, to be honest with you. And I'm not saying that should matter for fantasy purposes, but for fantasy value, he's not a QB. You're like, oh, I love watching this guy play. Like, there are certain players, George Pickens, for example, I have a positive emotion about. Deshaun Watson, you kind of hold your nose and say, it's fantasy football. I'm there for the stats. And if the stats haven't been there, you know what I mean? Like, there's no extra reason for me to reacquire him, in my opinion,
Yeah, no, that's fair. I would still, I'm going to get Deshaun Watson if he's at like the QB 17 price. Like, I don't know necessarily what you have to pay, but I would be willing to pay a first and a second to get Deshaun Watson if that's fine. If you look at what he did before he left, he only had one down game, and that was against the Steelers, and the Steelers have an incredible offense, right? The beginning of the season, he started off a great defense. Sorry,
Steelers have the opposite of an incredible offense.
Yes, great defense. Their offense is atrocious. But he started off the season, he had 22 points for fantasy purposes against the Bengals, the 13 that I was talking about against the Steelers, and then a 25-point game against the Titans before he left. So, a lot of it is still the stench of him just being Deshaun Watson, right? And then him missing games. And so, if he comes back and he can continue to do that, if I can buy him right now before he gets back from the injury for a first and a second, absolutely. Like, if you just lost in A-Rich, go and buy Deshaun Watson if you can. Don't get rid of A-Rich. But if you have a first and a second, go and try and get Deshaun Watson to replace it.
Can you remind the listeners of the name of your franchise in the Yacht Club, what you call your team?
Bad's Dynasty, baby.
Breaking news, Bad's Dynasty is morally bankrupt and will sign any player regardless of their...
Listen, we're talking about football here. We're not talking about everything on the side. I'm putting all that aside. But KTC doesn't. That's the thing. KTC legitimately doesn't.
It doesn't. The point I do want to bring up, though, is I'm concerned about his character, not from all that crazy stuff that happened. Him not playing with a fully guaranteed contract with a rotator cuff. From what I understand, this injury is about pain tolerance. That does not send the right message. Lamar Jackson holding out when he didn't have a contract in playoffs was like, look, dude, I can't take this risk right now. When someone is paid and the leader of your team is paid, I expect you to go put your body on the line for the team. And the fact that
There's
they
a
beat
difference.
the Niners without him, that to me, that says Cleveland isn't dependent on him. And frankly, that he's overpaid and overvalued. I
False.
I
False.
think
I,
that
I
there's
disagree with that narrative, and here's why. Part of why I think he's paid, right? He's paid to win games. That's why he's there, to win games. They had a
right.
bye week, week 5. Why would they rush him back and try to, like, it was after the bye week, but if they had that time and they still decided, oh, you're not ready to go yet, why would they say, hey, let's risk you being out for the rest of the season after we paid you or guaranteed you, what, 200 and something plus $1 million? They've got to play it smart. They can't just say, suck it up and go play and get hurt longer. I actually think it's wise to not just grit it out like that, because you're just going to
That's
hurt the
fair.
quarterback, and it's just sustainability. You sign
Yeah.
into this long-term contract.
Listen, I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about rotator cuff injuries. So, like, that might have been the right call. I'm simply saying this is a quarterback, and this is a team, specifically a head coach, who has a lot to prove, and they're on the hot seat immediately, not just in the public's opinion, but in the opinion of their GMs. And so I would just say that Deshaun Watson needs to do everything he can to remind people why he was worth the highest guaranteed contract in quarterback history. Even the new contracts, the Supermaxes.
Feels so gross defending Deshaun Watson, but
it's
it feels so gross.
Before we move off of him, Elijah Moore was a guy we were both really high on coming into the season. I know you have him in Yacht Club. Are you excited for Elijah Moore and Deshaun Watson to click? Is that part of the reason you believe Deshaun Watson can return to form? Because the opportunities have largely been there. The guy is averaging 7 targets a game with a little bit of rushing mixed in. If Deshaun refines his form, does Elijah kind of head to the moon like we thought he could, or do we need to accept that the Elijah Moore experiment just isn't going to happen?
Like you said, I have him on my team, so this is a little tough. I still am holding on hope. I still think Elijah Moore is an incredible talent. Yeah. I just don't know what they're doing. Deshaun Watson, like you said, he's getting the opportunity. He's just not really producing. I mean, he's got 9 targets in 2 games. He's got 7 targets in the last game. It's just like you said, he's not doing anything with it. And last game, there was one where PJ Walker just threw it short, and he was wide open. And if he gets that pass, if he catches that, and he makes even the slightest bit of play, and he gets 11, 12, 13 points, he's back on the radar. People are going to be back in on him. So, and he's still young, 22 years old. So to answer your question, that is part of why.
This year. He just turned
23. So. Yeah, 23 years old. Yeah. He's still young. So, I mean, that is part of why I'm in on Deshaun Watson. He has the sporting cast to do it. I think losing Nick Chubb definitely threw a wrench in their game plan, right? They were expecting to be able to run the ball a little bit more. Not that Jerome Ford's been terrible, but yeah, I think Elijah Moore is a guy that if I can buy low on, I'm still gonna go and try buy him for a second. I still am, and that may sound crazy, but I believe in the talent.
Before we move on and get to Below Deck, we have a special guest joining us again. I want to get your thoughts. You were at the Cowboys-Chargers game, and as a fellow Cowboy fan, Davis and I talked about it at length. He's also a Cowboy fan, makes us look bad. Nothing we can do about it. Cowboys Nation. Are you excited? You're also the Dak Prescott owner. Were you excited by what you saw, or did you feel, as we did and as we mentioned, that Mike McCarthy needs to go and we're just delaying the inevitable?
Everything that I saw at the Cowboys game, including it being a Cowboys game, like a Cowboys home game, even though it was in LA at SoFi, it was literally a Cowboys home game. The section I was in was full of Cowboys fans. When it was third down for the Chargers, it was louder in there than it was third down for the Cowboys. So it's just that atmosphere was incredible. But from watching the game, and I heard you guys talking about it, and we've talked about it a little bit off air as well about our perspective on is Prescott the issue. And I'm glad that Davis took a little bit of a step back on his heat on Prescott, because we have a McCarthy problem. The Cowboys have a McCarthy problem. It is not a Dak problem. We saw Dak this past week. I saw it live. He improvised. Every single thing that he did was a complete improvisation on the play that was called. And you saw like him running for a touchdown. I was like, thank goodness. That's what we've wanted to see. He hasn't ran the ball at all ever. And he's been played super conservative, but it felt like he was playing loose. So I don't know what the changeup was or what happened, or if Dak was just like kind of, you know what, F it, get on my back. We're going to do this.
I think it was the rushing. I think he's an athletic QB, and when he's allowed to be, it's great. It's just, it happens so rarely ever since that ankle injury, that horrific one several years ago.
And rightly so.
Once in a blue moon, they'll rush Dak. Speaking of environment that you were there, I have to ask, because it went viral. There was a massive brawl, like after the game I saw online. No cops are listening. This is alleged. Dylan, was that Did you get in there? Did you throw some hands, or did you
I
stay
may
away
have
from that kind of
solicited
trouble?
it. No, absolutely. I stayed away from that. I stayed away from that. I'm a
I feel
lover,
like
not a fighter.
I know, but all fans that if you're gonna get in a brawl with, I would feel pretty good against Chargers fans in general.
Yes, I don't.
Like
If you look at it, a lot of it is Charger fans in that video, and they're all just on the ground, just like flailing. It looks they're
ah,
slipping on beer and whatnot. But no,
a
I
lot
do
of
want
our
to
friends are
say
Charger fans.
or
You
ask
guys
you about
stink.
Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is we've established that he's not the problem. However, his value is continuing to slip. He had a good game
Yeah.
this past week. What are your thoughts? Because I've been asked if I would move off of Dak Prescott in the yacht club, and to me he's still, and call me naive, call me a Cowboys fan. To me, he
No.
is still a safe QB that I can build around.
Yeah, no, I mean he's quarterback 18 on keep trade cut. So let me just turn him into like a stock, or let's turn him into a home, like for my job, right? The Dak Prescott as a person, all that, like he's more than a product. I get all of that. Dak can have a great rest of his year. I don't think the market is going to correct and price him according to the production that you appreciate, Dylan. I don't think you'll get a price that's
Mm-mm.
accurate to Dak Prescott. You have to hold and wait for a catalyst like a coaching change or a signing of a big weapon to you know, reacquire his value. Whether or not he's the QB you want to build around, you kind of have to. Because you're not going to get, and this is actually the problem the Cowboys had when signing him. I think it's like you're not going to find much else that's better, safer, with more upside, but you're also not going to get the upside you need to be special. And so you're kind of in this limbo of like, because I don't think Dak is ever going to be a top 10 dynasty QB ever again. Like he's not going to get a better offensive coordinator than he had in Kellen Moore. He's now on the wrong side. Well, he's 30. I'm on the wrong side of 30. He's 30. And he still has a Mike McCarthy problem, as we've talked about. And also, we haven't talked about this. The Dallas Cowboys defense is becoming the better unit on the Cowboys. So that's how they're winning games. He's going to be in less shootouts. At least that's not what they value. They want him to ball control. So I think you should hold on to Dak Prescott. You can build around him because the production will actually be solid. I think he'll always flirt with a top 12, back end top 12 QB. Like every season, he'll be the QB 14, QB 15. But I just don't think he's ever going to. You're never going to be able to reset your team by selling him, and you're also never going to be able to ride him all the way to a championship. So he is in limbo, just like our Cowboys. We're going to take a quick break. I hope I answered your question enough on Dak Prescott, Dylan.
Yeah.
Wrote my dissertation there. When we come back, we're going to be talking all things Yacht Club with a good friend of ours who helped design yachtclubdynasty.com, where you can dive into our entire league. Mr. Brandon Hunter is back. Stay tuned. Joining us again is a valued member of the Yacht Club and the self-appointed voice of our other owners. He felt that the show, while was excellent in every respect, he wanted to make sure Davis, Dylan, and I weren't telling incorrect stories. So he took it upon himself to help create a league website, which you can now visit. It is active. But we would welcome back in Mr. Brandon Hunter, the self-appointed chef of the Yacht Club. B-Hunt, how are you this fine evening?
Self-appointed.
Oh, it is self-appointed.
The self-proclaimed.
You called me. So, whatever. But I will say, you talking about that, maybe I am narcissistic because this is in my mind. In Batman, where Bane comes on the scene and he overthrows Gotham's city mayor, right, and the government. And you're kind of stuck in this place like, dang, is he doing the right thing? Because they are really corrupt, right? Like that is how those heroes are. And in college, you used to think that if I was a villain in any hero movie, I would be Bane, which, villain or not, is an absolutely necessary evil. So I appreciate that. I don't think
Not
I'll
about
sell.
necessary.
He took a page out of Davis's book and literally just
Yeah.
made something so
No,
negative become a compliment for himself.
Here's why I think you're Bane. You're villainous and have selfish deeds, but it's under the guise of like, I'm doing this for us. in that movie you referenced,
Fair
there's
enough,
a
fair
dirty
enough.
bomb. Yeah. So all that
Fair
being
enough.
said,
maybe
listen,
the mode of action isn't the best.
fair enough. I should be buttering you up because Roger Goodell just got an extension as the NFL commissioner. The entire goal when I made this league was to feel as much like NFL owners as we could. And I would be lying to say at times I don't feel like Roger Goodell. So I thought this would be a good time to ask the self-appointed voice of the people and a dear friend who I know has known me for a long time for a bit of a performance review. How have I done as the commissioner? And more importantly, am I worthy of a raise? Because I feel that I am.
Yeah. I don't know what you're getting paid. And if you are getting paid, no, because I didn't know that was a part of anything. Maybe we should defund the commissioner, and I'll probably put that in chat later with a hashtag, and we can start the train, because I am the man of the people. I am the voice. But
full audit.
Dude, I mean, let me just say this, because I'll give you some flowers first, and then I'll squash you, because that's what I do. I'm a Sour Patch Kid too. You have built the best league. Genuinely, we are the beneficiaries of your dedication to babysitting. You could open a daycare and be very successful because you already watch 14 toddler organizations, yourself included, because you have a lot to worry about over there. But I think for what it is, the cast of characters that we have, I do think you do a great job just wrangling us in and bringing us back to what it is, and recognizing how grateful we should be for the nature of our league. That being said, though, the bone that I do want to pick is, we come with a lot of drama. I know fans hear it, and Davis, like you get it. Even in an hour of listening to the guy, you know that there's problems on the other side. Davis stirs up a ton of trouble in our league, and for some reason it employs a ton of investigations by the commissioner, right? So Josh will send into the league chat. He says an investigation is underway. You will hear from us shortly. I don't know who us is or who the investigators are, but I have never heard from them. Nobody has ever been held accountable for anything in our league. So that is my one thing I have against you, is maybe you can appoint a better detective, if there is one that's existing. But yeah, man, that's my problem.
Isn't us technically him and Davis? Because Davis is he's the only one that's been appointed any other authority.
No, we have a treasurer. We have a secretary and a treasurer. Davis is just super active. He's what you see. Miller holds a different owner holds all of our money. So
who leads the investigation? Let's talk about it. Yeah. I literally want to know.
No, it's me. And frankly, it's every time I do it, I'm like, this feels like a waste of my time, because what am I going to actually do? It's not like if you send me a screenshot of a text, I have to trust you're sending me good evidence if there's a problem. And if people are wondering, I'm serious. Like,
you're a softy. You're a softy. Admit it. You're a softy. Part of it is you. Softy. Yes.
Dude, you lived in California too long, you little Texas
too long. Yeah, you become soft. That is part of why. To elaborate a little bit on, I didn't even know you got paid. So asking for a raise is pretty ridiculous. An extension, sure, but we have to have some law and order and some accountability. I just want to know with the follow through, accountability, what's going on here.
So I would love a multiplication of my salary. I'd like to make 30 times what I currently make. It would happen to be the same number, because 30 times 0 is 0. Unless, of course, I can bill y'all for the personal costs. Every commissioner can feel this. You spend, like, everyone has buy-ins and stuff. The amount of things I buy extra for the league just on my own dime, because I realize, like, oh, we needed this software for the editing the internal pod, or we needed the draft board, or whatever it is, you always come out of pocket, because raising more money after you've made the budget is impossible. The reason I don't ever punish anyone off these investigations, it comes back to why I made this league contract that I've talked about. If it's not a written rule, how do you regulate that? Like, for example, Davis, one time, he basically made a deal with an owner where he was like, I will tank with you, but then I will play my starters against everyone else, and so you can still make playoffs. So redo this trade with me. Mike heard about this. He goes, that sounds like quid pro quo. And I'm like, I technically can't. What do you do with that? Maybe that's a question we should pose to the public, like in a poll. Like, how do you stop someone from promising to start certain players when they're allowed to start whatever players they want? You answer me that question. What should I do?
The fact that you have to deal with that is just ridiculous. I would want to see a poll with how many commissioners have to deal with that. Like, it's got to be very few.
You would think that Davis is an attorney with how he rips through contracts, dude. This guy like finds an insane amount of black holes and little loopholes that he just climbs into and exploits. But Josh, I just want to ask you a question, man, from a commissioner. We're giving you crap, and this is quite literally what happens every single day, right? It's like, how many times have you been voted to get impeached in a way that doesn't even? Yeah, and I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
There's been legitimate polls in our chat to get Josh removed as commissioner.
Might start one right now. But I will start one right now. In the range of emotions that you cause, can you just give us from me and Dylan to just maybe just respect what you do as the commissioner of our league?
Yeah.
What is the range of emotions? And honestly, I mean, I can admit that I myself am an absolute toddler when it comes to how I react in fantasy football. And you have 20 of them, right? With 14 teams and like 6 corners or whatever it is. Dude, I mean, it's a lot, but can you talk us through what that actually does to you as an individual person? How can we sympathize with you?
I don't know that I only feel like other commissioners can, because what you're doing is it's really hard to both host the party and host the game and play the game at the same time, because you're always kind of, there's that duality. Like you don't feel like you can fully play and you don't feel like that you can fully host. There have been many times where I'm like, dude, this isn't worth it. This is annoying. But the real reason I keep doing it, and the real reason I always wanted to just innovate and up the ante, was one, because we needed something for all this extra energy. And I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier about Davis. Like, he is a bit of an anti-hero. Like, there's a level of Davis where he's just pushing the envelope because he just wants to play more. And I needed to find a way. And with every innovation we've had, I had to find a way to keep all these toddlers kind of distracted and happy. But the real reason I would want to keep them happy in the first place is so many of these guys are like my lifelong friends. And if I wasn't calling you guys about football, I probably wouldn't call. Like, I know how Dylan is doing in the rest of his life. B-Hunt, you and I have kept in contact since college because of fantasy football, not because we're great guys. And so at the end of the day, fantasy football is watching and talking about football. We're taking it to the most extreme level of enjoyment to do that. And if it keeps me in touch with people I genuinely love, then it's great. The problem is when at times it becomes such a burden, I don't genuinely love them anymore. And that has happened a couple times where I'm like, bro, I don't have the time for this. So that's the only drawback. But as long as you love the guys you're playing with and you love the group chat and you love just talking smack to one another, we're all good and gravy. But sometimes it does. Yeah. This is like a therapy session. Like,
hey, dude,
it takes a lot more work.
Can let it out.
Yeah.
I'm a man of the people.
So much work. You guys are so
I gotta
annoying.
know what you want to say so I can communicate back to the pitchforks and torches, and then we'll be back at your doorstep tomorrow. But I'm glad that you said it, because you said you cannot host and play the game simultaneously, and there's a lot of a balance in that. Fortunately for you, you do not play the game, right?
Wow.
You have
very
Amir
passive.
Abdullah. You have Amir Abdullah in your RB1 position. So let's just make it clear you actually do not play the game.
I'm tanking. I'm rebuilding for the future. That's a strategic decision.
Oh my gosh, we've talked about this.
Yeah, we're not going to get into it. Josh's timeline is like 2038.
22.
Listen, at least I feel so attacked right now. I don't want the raise anymore. I don't want to be extended. I just want to focus on my team. This is what happens. You come up with a good strategy, and then your friends get you emotional, and they get you tilting and changing your mind. So I'm going to end this podcast before I change my mind and spend all the rest of my 25 firsts on win now players just to beat. We're playing each other this week, right, Hunt?
Yeah, you're projected 25 points. So.
Well, I might change that with a few trades right now. So if you'd like to find out more about our league, visit yachtclubdynasty.com. I'm about to tilt and go get some win now players. Good night, everyone.